no intro needed, really. I think that explains the concept well enough on its own.
You know what we're doing.
If you want to share your screen, we can just dive right into it.
Yeah.
Hi there, and welcome to yet another episode of the Make Art, Don't Starve podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey.
And I'm your other host, Al, and today, Kelsey and I are going to be giving you presentations on some of our favorite artists. Slay.
We're honestly super excited. Yeah. It's going to be great. So no intro needed, really. I think that explains the concept well enough on its own.
You know what we're doing.
If you want to share your screen, we can just dive right into it.
Yeah. So when it came to like picking an artist, the thing is I am the kind of person who can enjoy things fully superficially. Like, I can enjoy something to the fullest extent and not know a damn thing about it. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. So there are a lot of artists that I love, like Van Gogh, Frida Kahlo, that I could talk, Norman Rockwell, that I could talk about, but like I don't really care about them. Like, I don't really care to learn about them more than like the average person already knows. And so I had to think about like, who is someone that I really want to know about, like as an artist, as a person, that I want to deep dive. And the answer to that was J.C. Leyendecker. And it was an immediate thought of like, who do I care about beyond just like surface level? And I was like, oh, J.C. Leyendecker, obviously. Because he is, as we all know, a queer inspiration.
Yes.
To understand why I like him so much, we have to start with the fact that I'm gay. If you don't know, I
did not know this. Wow.
Yeah, I don't
Big
think anyone
surprise.
knows this. It's. I'm trying to be really subtle about it.
You
gay.
have. Wow. I
know.
You've.
Yeah.
I feel like everything I know about you is like a lie now. I mean,
Yeah,
oh my God. This is just, it's big news. It's big news. Okay.
Yeah, I understand if you're not comfortable with, me being on the podcast now, because it is something that I've kept a total secret forever.
Definitely a secret.
Yeah,
Had no idea.
No, I definitely don't have
coming
a series.
as a big shock. I'm really trying to
Yeah, I understand. Take the time.
deal
take
with all of these
time you need to process.
these big revelations that I'm going under right now. Wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you processed? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I think I'm ready to move forward. Yeah.
So I'm gay, and being gay does influence, being part of my identity, it does influence the way that I interact with media and the way I experience, art and the art world specifically, and my consumption of art. And one thing that I've always found lacking is a connection to art. As much as I might like a piece, there are some pieces that, don't feature people and I can connect to it fully. But there are a lot of things that I love about art that I've never fully had like the complete like click. You know what I mean? And so to combat that, to deal with that, I started the series Make It Gay, where I insert queer people into some famous classical paintings from genres and styles that I absolutely love but have never felt represented by. And so that is a little bit of context as to why J.C. Leyendecker means so much to me, is the fact that I've always felt like there's this huge lack of representation. Not to say that there aren't queer artists from back in the day. There are. As someone who is very superficial, like, I don't look for artists, you know what I mean? I let them come to me. So J.C. Leyendecker is not the extent of my knowledge of queer artists, but he's at the top of my mind. But just because I don't know the artist doesn't mean that queer people haven't existed. There have always been queer people. There's this Tumblr post by Anne V. Bonney that I think about literally every day. And it talks about how it's a small compilation of a few historical quotes from queer people, usually artists, talking about what it was like, thinking about how queer people in the future will look back one day and see them for who they are, even though they couldn't be who they are, and they're happy for us that we get to be who we are. And I cannot articulate the emotion that these quotes evoke in me. I truly, truly can't. The best one is Sappho. Someone will remember us, I say, even in another time. And I hope queer people understand what I mean. It's the most difficult emotion. I mean, it's the most profound emotion I've ever felt. And it's so strange because, I don't know these people, but it's this deep connection. It feels like through time and space we're reaching out to each other, and you get to lock eyes with someone and say, like, I see you, I understand, and you see me, and it's because of you that I get to be seen. And it's a very profound emotion. And it sounds silly because it's just like a few quotes, and I've been very lucky.
But like, representation matters.
Representation matters. And it's a very interesting thing, especially when, for queer people, for so long in history, it's something that could be hidden, and you would hide it. It's so interesting to think about. Like, there's always, on TikTok, there was that phase where every time you saw an old gay person, be like, wow, crazy. Because it's weirdly validating to see that beyond like young people like my age, that there are queer people, you know what I mean? Finding out that they exist in history, there's this weird fascination of like, wow, it's real. It's not just like a thing that we're trying to prove is real now. It's always been real. It's a very interesting feeling. And J.C. Leyendecker, to me, is the visual representation of that emotion. In short, this guy gets it. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. And his visual representation of this feeling is so fascinating to me. It's funny to me. It's beautiful. And we'll get into all those emotions later in the presentation. But he is the physical, visual representation of that feeling of locking eyes through time and space and feeling seen and being seen. And some of that actual like locking eyes imagery is in his art, which I find so fun and so cool. And here we have a glimpse of some of that homoeroticism that this man just is absolutely known for. So really quick, we'll talk about who J.C. Leyendecker is, although he's a very famous artist, so I'm sure most people know, but that's the point of the presentation. So Joseph Christian, born in 1874, died in 51, I think of a heart attack. He was a German-American illustrator. He was born in Germany, moved with his family to Chicago in 82, and he either studied art or like tutored under artists. I believe he went to a school, but I don't know for sure. But he was a French Nouveau artist, or at least had a lot of that influence in his style, which is interesting that I love him so much because French Nouveau has never been my favorite style or genre. I love it a lot. Alphonse Mucha, I never know how to pronounce his name. Mucha. Is another, like, I love him, but there's something that to me, like, doesn't click. Like, I always say, like, Baroque and Renaissance art is my favorite. So it's always confused me why I love J.C. Leyendecker so much. I do love the style, but French Nouveau has just never been, like, my favorite.
It's Art Nouveau, actually.
Art Nouveau?
Yeah.
Art Nouveau, yeah, it's just never been, like, the older I get, the more I'm into it, because I'm realizing that Baroque and stuff is really hard to achieve. But it's just never been something that, like, you know, as a kid, there's just certain things that, like, call to you, and that ends up being things that you like as an adult in a more mature way. Art Nouveau has just never been, like, something that I was interested in. So I think it's really interesting that as I've gotten older, Art Nouveau and, like, 20s and Gatsby style is something that has called to me. And I honestly think a lot of it is because of J.C. Leyendecker. This man works magic. He worked between 1896 and 1950, although his work slowed way down after the 1930s. He was most popular in the Roaring '20s, and what was really shocking to me was how much he was an influencer back in the day, like really and truly. He apparently, I got this from a source, so I don't know what they're talking about, but apparently he was referenced multiple times in The Great Gatsby. His parties are like what The Great Gatsby parties were supposed to be like. He threw these crazy big parties with his partner, which I didn't know about. That's so fun and interesting to me. But he also influenced a lot of like the fashion. He was best known for like the Arrow Collar Man. So he did a lot of that, which I think is just so fun and so cool. And another thing that I'll talk about later. But like, I think it's so funny that this gay man was out here like telling everyone how to party, and I just think that's funny. Because, you know, if they knew, they wouldn't be happy about it. But slay. He did over 400 magazine covers for different magazines, 322 for Saturday Evening Post, which everyone knows that Norman Rockwell did the most, I believe, for Saturday Evening Post. But he was influenced very much by J.C. Leyendecker, and he's actually considered J.C. Leyendecker so apparently his last name is pronounced Leyendecker. I'm gonna keep saying Leyendecker because that's just what's gonna come out of my mouth. He was considered the father of the modern magazine. Like, magazines would not look the way they do today if it weren't for him. He's the one who became the first artist to really be identified with one publication and was commissioned so many times, and he really like paved the way for Norman Rockwell in so many ways, and also just the modern magazine, which is really, really cool. He was also known for the Arrow Collar Man, so he sold these Arrow Collar shirts, which became like one of the best-selling shirts, super popular. He did World War I recruitment posters. He worked for Kellogg's, a bunch of other places like this soap thing. So he did all sorts of stuff, and he was like really, really, really popular, especially in the 20s. And then in 1914, he moved in with Charles Beach, who is his supposed partner, in New Rochelle in New York. I believe he also moved with his sister and brother, although his brother died of an addiction or an addiction-related accident, either before then or they had been moving together before and then moved to New Rochelle. But he lived with, like, the only people he ever lived with was his, like, sister and brother, and then Charles Beach, which, you know, indicates certain things.
Yes, it does.
Yes. Oops. And then his career declined in the 30s with obviously the recession and the war. And as the Roaring '20s kind of died out, so did his career and the idea. He lived a very opulent and elegant and extravagant life. He was like the pinnacle of like what you think of the 20s. And obviously in the 30s, that wasn't really a thing anymore. So commissions really died out. He became a bit of a recluse. Apparently Charles Beach was pretty strict about who was allowed to be around or come to the estate. He eventually sold off a lot of stuff and then died in 1951. Here's an example of a Saturday Evening Post. Why is this Thanksgiving cover why are they so buff? Why are they so fine? There's no straight explanation for that, like, honest to God. Like,
yeah, it's very homoerotic.
It's very homoerotic. I mean, there's just absolutely there's no explanation for that. This is the Arrow Collar Man. That's the face of the Arrow Collar shirts. Here's a Kellogg's cover, which I'm not 1,000% sure that that's him, because that looks like a very different style. But this is one of like the few that were credited to him, so that I could find. But it's a very different style. And then here's a war bond thing, sign, propaganda, I don't know, which is so extravagant, and you can definitely see like the nouveau 20s extravagant like feeling to that one, which I love.
The heavy outlines and like just the very symbolic elements and everything, and how like the clothing is super draped.
Which slay. Despite the fact that he, like, it's pretty much accepted that this man was queer in some way, there's still some speculation around that, or it's considered speculation for him to be queer. And obviously, like, we can't know. He's dead. We can't ask him, and he's not going to tell us yes. But most likely he was queer in some way, gay, bisexual. But there is, like, this speculation about his, I mean, as always with historians love to be like, no, like, Achilles and Patroclus is still debated. Like, besties. If they lived with their husband for most of their life, they were probably just gay. Just like let it go.
Like Eleanor Roosevelt was lesbian.
Yeah, didn't she? Who was it? She had like there's a whole book published about her letters with her girlfriend, and it's like just
she like had a little cabin, and FDR was like, go be with your bestie, and she was just like, I'm gonna.
Like it's, but again, you know, gal pals, besties, bros being dudes, they're just friends. Despite the fact that J.C. Leyendecker left half at that point his estate was pretty modest when he died, but he split his estate 50-50 with Charles Beach and his sister, which I wouldn't do that unless I really cared about someone. So I think it's really interesting.
And they lived together for
a
like
significant
decades.
period of time, a very like most of their life. They were together. I think Charles Beach was 17 or 19 or something like that when they met, and they were basically attached at the hip, or considered, you know, from this standpoint in time, they were associated in some way for, you know, after that point. So for most of his life, Charles Beach's life, he was with J.C. Leyendecker. So that would be an interesting choice if they were literally just besties.
Yeah, and also like, I don't know, it seems, you know, like the obvious conclusion's usually the right one.
Right. And especially like with queer people, you get so used to like, especially if you're older, like, you know, when we didn't have like just queer media all the time, you get used to reading the subtext and reading between the lines. We're pretty good at it.
For sure. And it's not like they could be super out about it. I mean, they had the like insulation of privilege, obviously in the 20s. Yeah. Like, they were huge commercial successes and probably had the connections to keep like things secret, even if they were pretty obvious. But like, it's not like they'd, you know, get a skywriting plane to just like announce it to the world.
Yeah. Beach was also super involved with J.C. Leyendecker's career, which is another thing of like, I wouldn't let just some person do that. But he would like set up the galas and stuff that J.C. Leyendecker was pretty shy. So he didn't want to do those things. So Beach helped with that stuff. And I think that's another pretty significant thing of like, they might not be writing it in the sky, but like, it's, you know, who else is helping with your career? He also based the Arrow Collar Man off of him. That's the picture on this slide. That's his boo, supposedly. And it pretty much in almost every painting, you can see a man who looks somewhat like that. And Charles Beach confirmed did pose for a lot of his stuff. But he not only did that, but he like based all the sexy men off of his boyfriend. So like, go off, I guess. If you still want to think that they're just besties, like go off. But it's pretty clear that at the very least, J.C. Leyendecker was very in touch with homoeroticism, the male form, male sexuality. He was into that in some way, shape, or form, even if it was just an artistic appreciation for it, but he was very in touch with that. There was a great article that I have somewhat, I sourced from for sure, who analyzed J.C. Leyendecker's whole career and all of his art and like his like actual career and publications and his life and everything. And there wasn't enough like photo, like visual to go with it, but it was very interesting information, and it will be linked down below if you're interested. But there was a lot of very like timely symbolism. Things that might not like immediately connect for us now, but at the time was like, okay, dude, like limp wristing it like out in public right now. Apparently there was like a Trojan helmet, and he used like a newly sold like condom instead. Like he replaced the thing with a I don't know which one they're talking about, but it would like that was like really interesting for him to do. He also made an ivory soap ad with a man, which was like, why would you sell soap with a sexy man? Like, why would you use a man to sell soap? So there were a few things that he did like throughout his like public like Saturday Evening Post, like front cover, everyone saw things that were like subtle little hints that like, hey, limp wrist, oops.
Yeah.
So here are some of my favorite examples of the homoeroticism. I don't know. So there's also, I've heard that it's supposed to be both of them. I couldn't confirm this in my research, but the guy with the dark hair could be J.C. Landecker. I don't know. I don't know. But anyone who's blonde, a man who's blonde, you can safely assume was at least based off of Charles Beach. And there's a lot of, I think this is for Arrow Collar. There's a lot of like, he sold these shirts with the idea of male sexuality. It makes you sexy, and it worked really, really well. Sex sells. But there's a lot of charged emotion, and it's like, why this? I look at this and I don't see a shirt ad. You know what I mean? He went so hard for a shirt ad, like I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, and like with the other one, like with the golf club, I mean, that's a phallic metaphor if I've ever heard of one.
Oh, I know. And he's got the pipe like in his mouth, like,
yeah. God. There's a conversation happening there.
Oh yeah, there's some subtle clues. These, like, come on, I don't need to say a word. There's a nipple out. There's a nipple out and a butt is pointing at us.
Yep.
Eye contact. Look at that eye contact. There's just like this, there's something about, and the way that the men are always like so handsome. Eye contact. There's a pretty lady right there. Eye contact. His legs are spread. Like, come on.
Yeah, she's not even the focus of the piece. She's like pushed into the,
she's literally in the background.
Yeah.
She's a prop. She's literally a prop. Eye contact. Like, that's crazy. I don't know why, but like this one gets me. This one I'm like, okay.
That one says some things.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is a sock. These are sock ads. Again, no words necessary.
Interesting.
Right? Okay.
The little sock garters.
We need to bring this back.
They really say something. They really do.
The robe, the red, like, come on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Crazy. But why does it matter? Like, why does it matter to me? Why does it matter in general? If this guy was gay or not? If his art was gay or not? Like, what? Who cares? The thing is like, so like I touched on before, being gay is now something that, despite it being something that you can be discriminated for, it's something that was really easy, at least, for most people, to hide. And that, like, permeates today. Like, it's crazy when on a kid's show, like, I hear, it, like, makes the news when a Disney show has a gay character in an episode. You know what I mean? That shouldn't be news at this point. I feel like 2022, that shouldn't be news, but it still is. It's so easy to erase queer people in history and in media. There's always like a edited version of shows if people do get mad that they can release the second version without the gay people. It's like I said, there's still speculation about Achilles and Patroclus, about whether or not they had something going on, There's that story of some pharaoh that they found, the Egyptian pharaoh, that was literally buried with his male wife, and their hieroglyphs explain their love story, and archaeologists are like, they were just best friends, that was his favorite servant, and it's like, not like, so the fact that like that can still happen today, like, that's why this is important. That's why, like, the idea of having undeniable visual evidence of queer people existing, when it can be kind of a lonely identity, especially like I don't have a lot of queer friends, and like in real life, in like around me currently, it can be a lonely identity for a lot of people if you grow up somewhere where that's not accepted or it's illegal. It can be a really lonely identity, and to see throughout history queer people existing shamelessly, or even if it's hidden, being able to pick up on that is so awesome. It's a great feeling. Representation matters, like, no matter how subtle it is. It sucks that it has to be subtle sometimes, but like looking back in history, like finding out that they've always existed is the most comforting feeling. Sometimes it does feel like it's not a thing that has always happened, and seeing proof of that is really, really cool. And like I said, that idea of like touching between time and space, queer people will always be able to find like home and family in one another, and queer people aren't guaranteed the family that they're born with. I mean, no one is, but it's a scary thing for queer people. And there's this like, there's that like stereotype that queer people like end up flocking together, and there's always like a gay friend group, and that's true. And it's for a reason. And I think there's a reason that a lot of queer people like J.C. Landecker, like I like J.C. Landecker, and it's the fact that we find comfort in one another, and his paintings are a form of that comfort. Through time and space, he's giving us this gift of like, hey, like, I see you, and here's art specifically for you, even though it was an ad for a shirt. Here's something that you will see yourself in. And that is like so wonderful and amazing. And for me, that's what I've always wanted, like, as an artist. Like, growing up, when I would look at like art, and I loved it, but there was something missing. I never saw myself in art the way I would see other people in art. And to see like a gay artist making gay art is that's what I wanted when I made my Make a Gay series, you know, which some of my pieces, at least one, is based off of him, and he inspired some of them. Like, that's like the purpose of what I want from art. And so that's really cool that he's doing that, and he did that at the time. I also just think it's so funny. Like, I truly, in a more immature sense, he got him, you know, he got him with that gay shit. He really said, I'm gonna make you all dress like a gay man, and none of you are gonna know. And that's so funny to me. The fact that, like, and also just the drama of it all, of having to hide your romance or your long-term relationship, your life partner, from the world. And by doing that, you put it on the most popular magazine on the front cover, like, every week for years. You put him out there and you're like, hey, look at how hot my man is. Like, that slay. The man is an icon. Absolute icon.
It's like, you know that, is it the Oscars with, like, Will Smith and Jada, and how he's just like this?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like that.
Yes, absolutely. That is exactly what he's doing. And it's so, like, he must have been bragging. Like, slay for him. It's so funny to me. I get so much satisfaction out of it. Also, like, the 20s to 50s era is my favorite historical periods for the only, I'm so bad at history. I don't really, not that I don't care about history, but, like, when I think of, like, media, I don't care about historical stories unless it's queer ones. And that era is my absolute favorite. There's something very interesting about it to me. And so him, just thinking about, like, what life might have been like for him, and the fact that he was plastering his boyfriend on everyone's, like, on front covers of magazines, just the romance story, like the love story there, to me is chef's kiss.
It's really special.
It is. And so really quick, just talking about, like, his style and why, despite the fact that I am not a fan of Art Nouveau, why it matters to me and, like, why I like him, and specifically his art, because that's kind of the point of the presentation. We'll get to that now. So I'm really inspired by Norman Rockwell personally. He's, like, when I talk about, this is my favorite artist, but I have 1,000 favorite artists for different reasons. And when I talk about, like, who inspires me most, Norman Rockwell is usually who I go to. And he is the OG Norman Rockwell. He's who inspired Norman Rockwell. And I think because of that, there's, like, this huge connection. Like, I can see past Norman Rockwell to J.C. Leyendecker, and, like, there's that connection, you know what I mean? That leads me to J.C. Leyendecker artistically. I also love, like, the stylized realism. I don't know the word. I always call it stylized realism. And that's, like, what I want to be able to achieve, where it's undeniably, like, realistic proportions. It looks like a person, but there's such a distinct look to them that it's not, like, clearly this is not photorealism, but it's not realistic, you know what I mean? And that's like what I want to be able to achieve. That's what I've been working towards, I think, my entire life, and I hope one day I will achieve it. But he is, like, the epitome, he and Norman Rockwell are the epitome of, like, making a believable figure, but doing it in an expressive way, in your own way, that has evaded me to this point. He also relies really heavily on shapes and lines, kind of like a graphic element to it, which is, you know, that Nouveau influence that does not compute for me, but I would love to be able to figure that out. That is something that I would love to learn from artists like him, and also, like, the entire, like, Nouveau, like that idea of, like, having, like, frames and these intricate details, but they're very shape oriented. I would love to figure that out, because I'm not good at that. And his ability to do that is very fascinating to me. Like, this picture in the front, like, just that blocked in background, like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. I like it. It's so cool.
I love like just the unfinished nature of it compared to how strictly rendered everything else is. It's a very nice contrast.
Yes, I've tried to do that so many times, like when I'm doing a sketch, but it's like that feeling of, like, I don't know how far out does it go on the page, like, where do I and, like, there's something so satisfying about his. It feels so complete, yet obviously it's not, and it's like, how did you know to do that? You know what I mean? And I would love to crack that code. I also love his color palettes. Again, this is something that I think he shares very much in common with Norman Rockwell, because I love this about Norman Rockwell. They have these very, like, very earthy and ochre color palettes, and then these pops of reds. And I love those pops of reds, like very vermilion reds. Yummy. So good. I love that color palette. It also feels very, like, of its time, you know what I mean? Like, I look at that and I feel like it's 20s and maybe 30s, and that's one of my favorite eras, you know, for art and like lifestyle type. Oh, well, that sounded bad. For, like, aesthetics, right? And I love that, and I wish I would love to I want, like, a book that just tells me, I know they exist, color palettes of, like, my favorite artists, because I want to steal them. Also, simple composition. One thing that and storytelling, so this goes hand in hand. One thing that I'm really bad about is understanding composition and creating my own compositions in art and balancing between really simple and really complex. And I want to have like clutter and visual complexity and visual clutter and just like things in the frame, but in a way that doesn't distract, but instead adds to the overall story that you're telling. And also being able to tell a story in a piece. And I think he does that with every single piece. There's so many visual elements that don't distract you at all from his pieces. They all tie together so well, and there's always something to look at, but you always end up back to his focal points. And there's a story told in each one, and there's symbolism in each one. And I would love to get to that point where I'm making full pieces that each tell a story. And so I find him very inspiring for that reason. And I also love that he includes figures. I'm partial to people and figures, and so his paintings very much call to me in that way. And those are my sources. That's it.
I think that I slightly misunderstood the topic of this episode.
No, do it however you did it. No, it does not have to be, we don't have to do it the same way.
Because I didn't focus on just like one artist and go like as comprehensive as you did, which like slay, by the way. I like have like a ton of artists, so I'm just gonna share my screen and we'll go from there. Okay, great. So the first artist that I want to talk about is Berthe Morisot. Berthe Morisot was a female impressionist painter. So there were two women that worked with the other male impressionists during the time. Okay, so you had Berthe Morisot and Mary Cassatt, who are both they're the first two artists in this presentation. And Berthe Morisot and Mary Cassatt, because they were women in this period, they did not have access to the same subjects that Van Gogh did, for example. So Mary Cassatt and Berthe Morisot couldn't, wander through to Paris at night and go to like a seedy cafe and paint like those paintings that Van Gogh did, right? Like they just didn't have that kind of freedom of movement. They just they couldn't do that. That would have been scandalous. And these women, Berthe Morisot was European. I think she was French. Mary Cassatt was an American who wanted so badly to learn art and was rejected by like the major art learning institutions at the time, and eventually like one of the artists that she was really passionate about took pity on her and kind of like taught her everything that she knows, and she learned a lot from his tutelage and then kind of expanded herself. But Mary Cassatt had to fight really hard to become an artist and gain like the respect of other colleagues in her field and to just like exist in the field at all, because men just were so overwhelmingly predominant in the artistic sphere as an industry, as a career. So Mary Cassatt had to fight just a ton to even gain the same level of education or opportunities that her male counterparts did. But Berthe Morisot, her work is really something special. I think her style is quite singular among the other impressionists. It's very blended. It's super dreamlike. You look at her work and you feel this sense of kind of a fairy tale. Berthe Morisot and Mary Cassatt both really cover women a lot in their art. Women are just subject and muse, and as far as I know, both of them were straight. But Berthe Morisot really paints women with this respectful softness that is quite non-objectifying compared to how someone like Renoir might have painted women early on in his career before he got married and started to be a little more respectful. But this painting over here on the right, which I love the colors of, by the way, I recently did a master copy of this piece that I didn't film, but it's going to be part of my collection when I release prints, is really unique. There's this woman, she's just doing this casual act of fixing her hair while she gets dressed in the morning, and the colors of this piece, first of all, gorgeous. I love the blue, the pink, how it compares and contrasts so nicely. It just vibrates off of that burnt sienna color of the chair and the mirror in front of her, and how just how loose it is while being still very tightly controlled and still extremely representational. And also just there's some nudity in this painting on the right, but it doesn't feel exploitative at all. It feels just like a normal thing that happens in the course of a day, not something to be ashamed about, which is not how female sexuality was treated in this era. And then also on the left, I just wanted to include this one just because I like it so much, about how that's gorgeous, how loose it is. And she's just standing there making some stuff in the kitchen, going about her day. And there's this really cute dog at her feet, and it's just gorgeous. So Bertha Morisot's work involved a lot of women as subjects. Both her and Mary Cassatt focused a lot on motherhood and the concept of like existing in the world as a woman, raising kids, like kind of the predominant activity that women kind of were allowed to do, because at this time women by and large were not allowed to enter the workforce, especially if you were middle to upper class as they were in this period. Like you couldn't go and work in a factory, probably like, you know, like some lower class women did. But Bertha Morisot also painted some landscapes, and these are really pretty too. Wow. Like it's interesting to see this different application of her style, of her like loose, like fairy tale-esque kind of style in this context.
Yeah, all of her stuff is giving me like very Studio Ghibli vibes, and this feels so atmospheric, you know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm there.
Exactly. There's some depth going on in here, but she's not layering brush stroke after brush stroke like Monet would. It's not like those tiny little brush strokes that verge on pointillism. There's a lot of blending going on here, a lot of like light washes, a lot of layers being built up. Like you can see in this painting over here, if you zoom in on the one on the right, how this is like all layers. This is all glazing. This is over here, this part, this like little white with the yellow. This is the base of the canvas or the panel or whatever this was painted on. And this over here is like the first messy layer using like probably turpentine or like spike oil or something to get like some color down. And the thicker layers are over here on the main figure, not the reflection. And even over here too, we're seeing just like the first part of that canvas, like the white of the canvas. And it's just interesting to me how she was able to layer so many of those techniques. So the landscape, I think, is just fascinating. It's just full range of tone and value, right? Like you're seeing the darkest darks and the lightest lights right next to each other, looking so incredibly vibrant and fascinating. And so this style kind of continues even further to women in like a more kind of domestic and Studio Ghibli, nature-y kind of fairy tale portrait of femininity in this period, which I think is just like fascinating to think about. Like it's not exploitative, it's not over-sexualized, like it's super respectful, domestic, tranquil. It feels very cottagecore. If art can feel that way, it feels very cottagecore.
For sure.
And I love this one on the left of like this young girl, maybe like talking to this bird. Like it feels very like Disney in a way. And I would love to see just like some 2D animation or something, or like, you know, Loving Vincent. I would love to see that in this style with like a really interesting fairy tale. I feel like that would just fit so well. But this
is so interesting because I don't think I've ever realized, like I don't think I've consciously thought about the fact that I haven't seen a lot of art, especially in this style, of women that, I don't even know how to put this, that feels like this, that doesn't feel in any way objectifying. Like this just feels like a picture of a girl in like in the purest sense, in like a happy sense. Like I feel like I haven't seen women portrayed in a way, especially in this like era and this style, in a way that's like I don't even know how to put it. Like this is a very new feeling that I get from looking at art. This is very interesting.
Yes. Oh my god, I have to show you this other painting that she did then. I didn't add it into this presentation, but I'm going to track it down. I know exactly what to look for. Because she did this one painting. Bertha Morisot did this other painting of this young girl like sitting at a piano, and she's silhouetted by this like just stark like cobalt blue, like the whole painting's cobalt blue, and there's this young woman sitting at the piano, and she looks like so done with piano lessons, like so tired, and it's like you don't see that kind of just like realistic like impish rebelliousness in young girls in other paintings. But Bertha Morisot was really able to capture like the humanity behind women that you don't see elsewhere.
That's perfect.
And Mary Cassatt was also able to do this in a very different way. So Mary Cassatt, again, was that American Impressionist that I talked about who spent most of her life in Europe, and she was an middle upper class woman. She was only able to pursue art as a career because her father financed her, essentially. And as her family got older and her career became more prolific, she was able to take care of them mostly and move them over to Europe for the most part. But Mary Cassatt painted like the claustrophobic confines of being like an upper middle class woman. Like you see these two women here in this painting like having tea, and I think this painting, among some others that I'll be showing you, are both in the National Gallery in DC. I saw them in person a couple years ago, and it was good. It was great. So if you have a chance, go and see them. But these two women are having tea. They're very closely cropped in. So everything that you need to know is shown in the painting. There is no extra room. And there's also no sense of depth, really. Everything feels very flat for the most part, and it makes us feel very tightly confined. Like the woman on the far left, she doesn't have like a single inch of extra space. She's like as tightly cropped in as she could possibly be. There is no extra room. The only extra room that we see is kind of vertically. So there's a couple extra inches there above the figures, but that has to be there really to communicate just the sense of place and the fireplace in the painting above. But they're having tea. The woman in the center, most of her face is entirely covered by this teacup that she's drinking from, and she's bored. Neither of them want to be there. They look like they're bored out of their minds, that they have literally like millions of other places they would rather be, and that because they're so cropped in, they can't leave. They're cornered in by the table and just like the teacups and the tea kettle and like all of that stuff. And also, if we think about our experience of the painting as like women as, you know, objects to be seen, to be regarded as, they're not looking at us, but they're also like disguising themselves. So they don't want to be seen or observed, especially the woman in the center who's like literally disguising her face. So it's really interesting. Mary Cassatt, her work really covers this in immense detail of like this relationship of viewer and audience, and what is it like to be a thing to be observed, and how do you experience that? What is that like emotionally? And for these women, they're both bored out of their minds by the constraints of their station, and also just like very resentful of having to be objects.
This painting is so interesting. I literally feel like I am on the couch opposite the table, and I'm a young gentleman who has been invited over for them to entertain me. That's exactly what this painting feels like. That's so like fascinating. This is a very impactful painting.
Yeah, and that's further continued in this one, which is one of her series of Loge paintings. I had to really try and find a version of this painting where the colors weren't super skewed, because like digital representations or digital reproductions of paintings tend to like really mess up the colors. But this is the more accurate one that I could find, and even then it's not entirely perfect. But this is that same trend. The same message of the previous painting continued here, but in a different setting with different women. And these women are young. So the opera was like a thing at this period. If you were like anyone of note, you like went to the opera, and it was not about what was on the stage. That was not the point. Going to the opera was for the explicit purpose of like being seen, being observed. If you were a woman looking to get married, you went to the opera so that you could be like checked out, basically. Like you're on the menu, you're literally on display. You dress in the best clothes that you have, flowers, you get like all dolled up, and you just sit there and you get looked at for hours. And these women, clearly they're uncomfortable by this premise. You see the figures that are supposedly looking at them, that they have their backs turned to, but in the painting, they're just like gestures. They're almost monstrous looking figures in the distance that we don't even really see in detail. They're abstract concepts. Like their existence isn't the point. Like the previous painting where maybe we were on the couch looking at them, they're almost like dead looking at us, except they're averting their gaze. They're uncomfortable. The woman in like sort of the left half of the painting is literally like, covering herself as much as possible with that fan, being like, don't look at me. I don't want to be observed. I'm not here. And you can see like how strict and confining and uncomfortable that is. Again, like the cropping in is so tight that we're only given exactly what we need to understand the message of this painting. In Mary Cassatt and Berthe Morisot's work, it was very disregarded in its time. Like Mary Cassatt, aside from these paintings, painted a lot of like scenes of motherhood, of like moms raising their kids, just like the same kind of tranquil domesticity that we see in Berthe Morisot's work, but they were totally ignored by like historians in the period. Their work was not seen as groundbreaking or innovative because, oh, you're just painting like women, you know, doing, you know, the dishes, or in the sink making cookies, or, you know, in the kitchen, or like, you know, in the sink making cookies. What am I talking about? In the kitchen making cookies. Or like raising their kids, like things that women do all the time. Why is that special? But like, why is a seedy cafe at 3 a.m. special, Van Gogh? Please explain that to me. And it's like, it doesn't have to be special to be interesting. And it really ties back to that same sense of like representation that you talked about. How like the way that you're depicted is really important. You don't want someone else telling your story.
Yeah.
So the last painting of hers that I want to talk about is this one, where we're really like, it's the message of like being seen and be like being observed and also looking back really is very stark in his paintings. There's this woman also at the opera, same as the other painting, and she's like taking those opera glasses and like looking. She's not looking at the stage, otherwise her angle would be, you know, more downward. But she's looking right across the opera at someone on the other side. Only this time, the figures observing her are far closer. They're still a little monstrous, still pretty abstract, but we see in this top left corner of someone, this man, leaning out, looking straight at her with his own, like, little, you know, what are they called?
Binoculars.
Oh my god. Yes, binoculars, thank you. And it really just brings all the message that we were talking about, like all of that communication of like, you know, what does this painting say to the forefront here? I think that's really interesting. Renoir did another version of this piece where the woman looks super gaudy. She's dressed up, but like almost trashy looking in his version. And it's one of the paintings like, more early on in his career. And like her cleavage is like really out there and it's just very exploitative. Whereas this painting is again very respectful.
Yeah.
She's obviously a widow, like grieving the death of her husband. That's why, you know, you dress in black. And she's observing. She's checking things out. She's just going about her own business, but she still can't escape being seen and being that kind of object. So shifting gears completely and moving into the modern era, we have one of my favorite landscape painters of all time, Richard Schmid. So Richard Schmid actually died like 2 years ago. Very recent, very contemporary. This particular painting of his is really something special. Moving water as just like a subject in landscape painting is pretty notoriously difficult to really capture the essence of it in that movement. And I think this painting does that really effectively with those long, sweeping brush strokes. You can see like this balance here of that tight rendering and the looseness that you were touching on with Landecker, like how tightly rendered everything is at the top and then how it just descends into chaos toward the bottom until we see his signature.
This painting is so visually striking. I thought this was a photo at first. And then those brushstrokes on the bottom, it feels like we're a little bit underwater and like looking out at the rocks. This is beautiful.
His work is just fantastic. I have 2 of his books. I have Alla Prima 2, which is said to be probably like the best oil painting instruction manual of all time. And then I have The Landscapes, which is like his big portfolio collection book. His work is very hard to find online, like faithful digital reproductions that are high quality, really hard to track down. So if anyone listening is interested in like doing a study of Richard Schmid's work and doesn't have, you know, the money, space to buy one of his books, which are expensive, they're like $100 each, then I would highly recommend that you look on auction websites. So auction websites are a great place to find high quality images of a bunch of artists, of like a bunch of their work, and Richard Schmid is, you know, definitely among one of those artists. It's really easy to find high quality stuff of his on those auction websites, but his own website does not have a robust portfolio section, so it is very difficult to find a comprehensive catalog of his work unless you go on those auction websites. So that's where all of these images were taken from. If you can't right-click save, go into developer mode in whatever browser you're on because the image has to be hosted on the website, and you can just bypass that by going into developer mode in whatever browser you're using. But anyway, so we have this painting, and then he also did a lot of houses too.
Ooh, yummy.
Right?
That's
how like clear the architecture is and all the little details, but how it just like descends into just this looseness when we see like the front yard here and even like the sky, and how masterfully he's able to convey just like the end of autumn with like the bare trees. I think bare trees are really hard to paint because all the spindly branches are very difficult to simplify, but he's able to give us the illusion of that through just like these tiny changes in value. So Richard Schmid would often paint on location and then refine in the studio. So a lot of these were probably painted just like on location, trekking out, getting out all of his stuff, and like that's hard. We've both tried that. And bugs, weather, lighting changes, everything that can go wrong will go wrong when you're painting outdoors. But Richard Schmid just like devoted his life to painting alla prima and en plein air. So alla prima is when you paint mostly in one layer all at once. En plein air is when you paint outdoors, those of you that don't know. And Richard Schmid just wanted to kind of combine both those disciplines. So this painting's really incredible how he's able to hint at all of this detail without having to really get in the trenches.
Yeah, this painting feels like a memory. Like, I feel like I just remembered something, like, that I forgot before. this is like an old house that I used to go to, and suddenly I'm picturing it again. I also love house-based horror, and that's also what this reminds me of, like it being slightly, from what I can tell, it looks slightly like decrepit, like a little bit, just a little
like it's
bit
falling apart, especially over here, like in the space between the trees. You see like all of this stuff, and it's like, what's happening here?
It feels like something's happening inside.
Are these stairs in good condition? This could be like the opening of like The Conjuring 4 or something, right? I would believe it. So he also painted a lot more landscapes. So I think has that same energy of being able to really masterfully paint the weather, like all of the seasons in gorgeous, vibrant color with their own unique character, and just the cluttered density of these empty branches here he's able to hint at really well by, again, like going for these really warm grays and just layering them on top of each other and adding a little bit of detail here and there where he needs to, but not getting too much into it. And that's really what I would love to explore in my own work, of like, how much detail do I absolutely need to have, and then contrast that with just like an insane amount of looseness, just really having the full spectrum of like rendering and like detail to looseness in one painting. And I think that is something that he does really well, especially in like still life paintings like this.
Oh my god.
Like, wow.
These literally feel like so nostalgic. I'm just amazed by how much this feels like a picture from my head that I'm looking at that I forgot that I knew. You know what I mean? Like, this feels so nostalgic. It's so crazy.
And just like, you see all the detail over here, all of the, you know, the skilled rendering with the petals, but it kind of falls apart as you get to the leaves, and everything is just exactly the level of detail that it needs to be, and just like nothing else. The message is conveyed, and everything else is just loose. And I think he's able to really walk that tightrope really well, because looseness is very controlled. If you do it right as he does it right, I think, you know, more than probably I will ever be able to do. His looseness is very controlled. It's very deliberate. You can really tell that he thought about every single brushstroke that went into this painting. All of it was a calculation, and I mean, look at the result, you know, and especially in like this painting here.
Oh my god.
Just the vibrant color, but it's not overwhelming. It's beautiful.
That's insane. This is insane.
Yeah.
Holy crap. It's so weird because it like feels real, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a brush stroke.
But it's also not hyperrealism either. It's something really unique. Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. That's insane.
So the last artist that I want to share with you guys is still alive today. I have a bunch of her prints. It's Jess Franks. Jess Franks is super colorful, very like illustrator-y, and I think has like took the lessons of Richard Schmid and like the analytical level of looseness and that kind of that calculated attempt at painting, and just like unleashed the entire just like spectrum of color in the process. So Jess Franks paints with acrylics. Unlike the other artists that I showed, which are all oil painters, Jess Franks is, I think, an exclusively acrylic painter. She uses a lot of like golden and Liquitex paints, and you can go on her Instagram, like look at her palette and stuff. She paints in washes and layers, so if you look at the painting really closely, you can see the process, right? Like over here, this is like the beginning layer of the painting. Ooh. And then everything is on top of it, and like this over here is the beginning layer, so is this, and then all of these layers of like the blue and the green were put on top. So even over here in the shadow area, we can see this vibrant turquoise was here first before the desaturated indigo blue, or maybe like Payne's gray, was there, and how she's carving out the dark areas out of the light and really just playing with that a ton, but also still conveying that like wonder and looseness that you would see in this place.
That is so I'm glad you zoomed in and walked through that, because that is so fascinating. If there's one thing I love about art, it's when you can tell something has been carved out. I love that shit. That is so, I love the colors too. And I love the way she did the river.
Yeah, over here, like just the way that she dragged things down with a little bit of water and then was able to layer just like all of this like glittering water above is really, really something special. And then I think it's more so of that, good. Like you talked about the looseness, that more of like understanding where detail needs to be and where detail doesn't need to be. Like that, I think that is the sign of a good artist, you know what I mean? Yes, exactly. Like you know your shit. You know where you need to communicate stuff, where you don't. Because too much detail feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
Or like my boyfriend loves that kind of stuff. He loves like super hyper realist work, but that's just not me. I want poetry in my art, not journalism. I want it to be like.
I love that. Yeah.
It's not mine. I read it somewhere. I don't know where. But yeah, so like that kind of thing is really special. This color palette is not among my favorite of hers. It feels a little bit more kind of fantastical, whereas this piece feels a lot more grounded.
That's very you.
It is. Yeah. That's the warm like colors of like autumn and like the grounded earthy tones. Yeah.
I love that sky. Oh my gosh.
It's so good. And you can see again like how she starts with these simplified masses.
Yeah.
Like all of this is just like one color that she's then carving out later.
What is insane to me, like I was gonna say what's making me really mad, because it's making me mad, but in the sense that like I'm so jealous and I can't understand, is like when you zoom in it looks like it's one color, you know what I mean? It's not like she's blending out a bunch of different things and she's getting all the different, from back here it looks so like there's so many colors happening, but you zoom in and it's like here's a chunk of color and here's a chunk of color, and that turns into one whole picture, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's so crazy to me. Like she's just blocking in large areas. That's crazy. It's crazy that there's no like,
blending happening on the surface really, as far as I can tell. Maybe like over here
maybe
this
some
looks like
dry
a
brushing happening.
Yeah, but like this is just like left to brush stroke left to brush stroke.
Insane.
Maybe some blending here, but like not a lot of blending going on. A lot of it is just like we're either doing a glaze, some dry brushing, or it's just straight color.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'm just so impressed with how she's able to do like rocks and stuff, and like the trees too. She's not bogged down. Rocks are so hard. I did rocks in my last painting process video, and like I was like this is a challenge.
They turned out good though, yeah.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so last painting of hers is winter. I think winter is a very hard season to capture faithfully, but this is gorgeous.
That's
so
my
good. God.
Wow. I mean,
I want to live in the world of this painting.
Yeah. This one is genuinely almost making me emotional. It's making me think about like Virginia winters.
The
like
snow looks tasty here.
Oh yeah.
Like I want to scoop up some and just like eat it. And I know it's always a bad decision, but like
snow is
she makes it look tasty.
This is, I mean, I love this. This is beautiful. I love the greens next to the reds.
Yes. If you're watching this when, to the viewers, by the way, when, like, around it comes out, she does an annual calendar every single year that, it's like a regular calendar, but they're perforated, so you can tear them off and use them as prints.
Interesting.
And it's the cheapest way to get prints of hers by far. It happens every year. A lot of these paintings will be included in that collection, if I recall correctly, so if you want to get your hands on some, now would be the time. I pre-ordered, like, 3 of them because I want to give them as Christmas gifts because this is an amazing present. It's so worth it. They're so gorgeous. The prints are like glossy. I have them on my wall and it's good shit. It's such good shit. I mean, like, just the color choices here are so impressive to me. Normally people don't see all of the vibrant colors in winter, but they're there, and her inclusion here, I mean, they just sing next to each other. Like this teal, this like light bluish teal next to like this brown and like that like really dark, almost purpley blue. It's like, who would have thought to put those next to each other?
Yeah.
And then you have like the periwinkle and like the dusty pink meant to convey like depth and distance, and like, oh my god, wow.
And the way she used the sky to carve out the branches to make them look so spindly, oh my god, like this is probably I love every single piece you put in this slideshow. This is my favorite. This is so amazing.
I'm glad I saved the best for last. But yeah, I mean, just how she's able to simplify masses here is so impressive. I think like with Richard Schmid, it's like movement and detail, right? Like with Berthe Morisot and Mary Cassatt, it's narrative, storytelling. With Jess Franks, it's just like shape simplification and color choices by far.
Yeah. And that's so interesting, like putting them all next to each other. One thing that I do these videos every once in a while where I go through some of my favorite artists, usually on Instagram, and pick out what I want to take from them. And what's so frustrating every time is they all are very different. And it's like, how do I translate this? Like, these are all things that I love and I want to be able to do. How do I do all of those things in one comprehensive style? And it's so hard. It's so hard to think about, like, all of these artists are so different. And how do you take inspiration from all? I mean, obviously you can. But, like, when you're thinking about, like, okay, my mental plan, how am I going to be the artist that I want to be? It is so hard to, like, purposefully get there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I agree, for sure. The way that, so I haven't been giving it a ton of thought, admittedly. I don't have like an underpinning strategy behind like my artistic growth, but I've been doing master copies and master studies as like my primary focus, like putting original work almost on the back burner, and instead of just like studying artists and just like writing stuff down, I've been copying them directly. Like, how can I just do my own iteration of this piece, try and faithfully recreate as much as possible so I can take some valuable lessons from it. And Jess Franks has like a personal policy kind of against this for posting online for selling things, which like, of course, you know, she's an artist alive today. Absolutely, you should not sell, you know, make your own version of her artwork and sell it. But for these other artists, leaving out Richard Schmidt here, like Marion Cassatt, Berthe Morisot, they're long since dead. You can do master copies of them and like sell your own version of their work without ever, you know, encroaching on their market share or taking money out of their pockets. Like, they're not going to starve. They're gone. So, and even still, you could and should do master copies of artists that you really love, just for personal learning experiences, and just don't try to make money from it. And in Jess Frank's case, like, respect her and don't post it online, but you know, study from these painters, learn what you can, because I mean, holy shit.
There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from these artists.
Yeah, so that's our episode. That is our favorite artists, or I guess Al's favorite artist and my favorite artists, plural. I love how like one letter.
I know, like,
two radically different things. It was a great time though. I had a blast. I hope you guys did too.
Hope you guys
we'll see you in the next one. Bye.